Hello everybody and welcome back to The Hobby Musician. Now you're joining us in the middle of a mini-series that we're running. We're building a Telecaster from a kit. Now on today's episode we're specifically going to be dealing with the neck and finishing and sealing it, but if you want to get caught up on all the episodes in this entire little mini-series, click the link at the top and that will take you to a playlist with every episode. Now, in the previous episodes, we've done things like preparing the body for painting and stuff like that. Well, before I started filming this, I did a couple of things to prepare the neck to be sealed and finished for this guitar. Now, one of the things you're going to notice is you see that the headstock is blue. Now, I have plans for a future episode. I'm going to do some decal work on the headstock. Now the reason I don't want the headstock to get the oil that I'm going to be using today is because I plan to put the decals on and then to coat just the front face of the headstock with that kind of higher gloss clear coat spray so that visually it kind of matches the finish of what the body's going to look like. So that's why I've got this headstock protected and masked off. And I did the same thing that I've done in earlier episodes. I took the painter's masking tape you can get at a hardware store, taped it down everywhere that I don't want to get any of the oil on, and then just took a very sharp razor blade and carefully went around the entire outline of that headstock, so I've got a nice, very sharp kind of protected face for this. Now the other main thing that I did to prep this neck is when I unboxed this kit and we were going through all the parts, I noticed that the fret edges were pretty well finished. They were kind of sanded down. There wasn't a lot of catching, but there was some. So some of the edges were just still a little bit sharp. And what I've done to this neck is I've taken my file, my fret edge file, and some sanding boards, and I've gone through on every single fret edge on both sides, and I've kind of just tuned them up a little bit, polished them up a little bit. And if you want to see how to do that, click this link and this will take you to another video where we do an in-depth tutorial on exactly the process that I'm talking about here. Now the last thing I did to the neck is that when I pulled it out of the box, pulled it out of the kit, I was kind of feeling around and kind of checking the finish, like how the neck felt, like was it sanded well. And what I discovered is the back of this neck, everything on the back of this neck is really, really well finished. So I didn't do a thing to the back. I'm just going to seal it with this oil today. But the fretboard was still a little bit rough. It was a little rougher than I liked. So again, before I started filming, what I took was I took some 400 grit sandpaper and I just lightly sanded the face just on the fingerboard and every single fret up and down the neck. And after I did that and wiped away all the dust, now every single fret is just as smooth as the back of the neck. So I'm happy with everything kind of on this neck. Now what we're going to use today, I've got some great news for you. If you're like me and you don't have like a full luthier's workshop, you don't need any fancy equipment. All you need is it's a 3-ounce bottle of tru-oil. Now you can find this online, and if you have any specialty shops in your area, you can probably walk in and get it. But tru-oil is an incredibly popular at-home hobby type, musician product. And what it does is it is specially formulated and designed to soak in and seal and protect wood. And the good news for us is luthiers all over the place and for a long time have been drawn to this because of how easy it is, how cheap it is, and how nowadays in the world of Amazon, you can order this and have it to your house in a couple of days. So that's what we're going to be using today. You'll also notice I've got some steel wool. I had to order this special. I got this is 4-0 or quadruple 0 steel wool, which means that's a way to know this is about the softest, finest steel wool that you can buy. And they rate steel wool in kind of like how many zeros and up to 1s, 2s, and 3s. But you're going to want some very, very fine, soft steel wool because as we go through this process, every now and then we might get a little drop or uneven area. And you're going to want something that you can be able to kind of lightly rub on the neck to sand out any imperfections. I also have a scrap piece of 2x4 because as we start to put oil on this neck, I need a way to rest it. I need to be able to put it on something so that the oil isn't touching anything, and because all of the frets stick up just a little bit away from the fretboard, if I take this neck and turn it upside down and lay it on the piece of wood, if you kind of check the gap in there, you'll notice that all of the surfaces of the wood, the neck wood, is actually raised up above it. So this is going to be, this little scrap of 2x4 is how we're going to kind of let things dry. And then I've got just a stack of an old t-shirt, old cotton t-shirt that I cut up to use as rags. So you can find on YouTube tons of other tutorials that kind of go over a similar thing. But as we've said in other videos, for just as many YouTube videos as you find that use tru-oil for a guitar neck, every single one of them has a different method. They have different numbers of coats. They have different times of waiting in between applying a coat. I've seen everything from videos saying where a person puts on up to 4 coats of oil a day, and I've seen all the way people say you've got to wait at least 2 days in between coats. I will say for this video, I am going to use drying time as my guide. On the bottle itself, if you read the instructions on the bottle, it does say spread evenly, all this kind of stuff, and just allow to dry thoroughly between coats. Now it mentions this could take 24 hours, 2 days, that kind of thing. But really the key is, if you're going to do this process, just apply a very thin layer and then wait until it's dry. I'm filming this in the summer months, so the humidity is a little bit higher, so who knows how long it's going to take, but I'm going to keep checking it. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to grab kind of just a whole stack here in case these get grimy. Grab my first rag, and then what I did was, after shaking this up, I just took a little screwdriver and poked a tiny little hole so that I can control how much oil comes out. Now I'm going to go ahead and just dab a little bit of oil onto the rag to get started, just about a dime size or a nickel size or something like that. And then everywhere you look, when you apply the oil, you're going to want to go with the grain. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go across the grain once just to get some oil on there. And then I'm going to go up and down, back and forth, because all of the grain on this neck is going vertically up the neck. So I'm going to go this way, and I'm going to get basically I want to get just the surface of the neck in this pass, and then that's when I'm going to flip it upside down and get the sides and the back. So it might take re-wetting this cloth a few times, going up and down, because you want to make sure that you're getting a nice even light coat going up and down here, and then maybe wipe off any excess so you don't have pools of this oil sitting on the neck. And with that, I'm going to keep working on this, and maybe I'll time lapse it for you guys, and then we'll kind of check in when it's a little closer to the end of the process. So, all right, hang in there. All right, well, there you have it. We are all set with our first coat, and like you could see in the video, I was really trying to just apply a little bit of oil over and over and over again so that I was never really going to be in danger of slopping the oil everywhere. So as the instructions say, and as we said at the beginning, I'm going to let this set until it's dry, and so I'm going to keep checking it. Maybe that'll be later today, maybe that'll be tomorrow, but as I do it, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to take some of our soft steel wool and kind of rough up the neck just a little bit if there's any bumps or drips that have dried weird, and then apply another coat. Same process over and over again until I'm happy with the finish, until I like how it feels, how it looks, and everything like that. And at first glance, really, it's maintained this nice kind of light maple. If anything, I would say that after applying this, it's kind of deepened that color a little bit. You know, not, I wouldn't say it darkened the neck at all, but it kind of just brought out a little bit more of that yellow, that pale maple kind of thing. So we're gonna keep checking this, and we'll be back to finish up this neck. So all right, I'll see you in a bit. Well, here we are 24 hours later. Now, after the first coat yesterday, I did what I said. I kind of waited a few hours and then checked it, and then waited a few hours and checked it again. And all kind of through the rest of the day, I noticed that the oil and the neck was still just a little bit tacky. And as we talked about, we wanted to make sure that the coat was very, very dry before we applied the second one. So I went ahead and left it overnight, and here we are the next morning, and sure enough, it is dry. So what we're gonna do now is I pulled out one of the pads of the very fine steel wool. I'm just gonna go over the whole neck and kind of smooth out some of the areas where maybe a little bit more of the oil kind of pooled up and made some droplets. And once it's all smooth, then we're gonna go back through the exact same process and put on a second coat. Let it dry and rinse and repeat until we're happy with it. So that's what I'm going to start with, and I'm actually going to start on the fretboard here. I'm going to go with the grain, so I'm going to take this steel wool and I'm going to kind of go, for me, kind of vertically up and down with this, so that as it's going, it's really going to be able to kind of stay along, again, up and down the sides. It's staying with the grain of the wood so that any of the oil droplets that maybe have built up will kind of get knocked down a little bit. Now, one thing to note as you're thinking about doing this yourself is you're going to see very, very clearly that as you use the steel wool, little flakes of the steel wool are going to come off, and they're going to kind of just get all over the neck. So before we put on the second coat, I'm going to take a lot of care to make sure that I use some of these rags and wipe it all down. We don't want those little metal flecks to stay on when we try to put the next coat of oil on top of it. So this is kind of just helping us rough up that surface, get any of the imperfections kind of out of it. And honestly, I think the fretboard's just the most time intensive part, because you get down to these higher frets and you don't have much work room in between those. But we're making progress here, and you know what? I might just go across. I can't really get any more up and down motion in these really skinny frets up here. So, okay, so the frets, and then you just run your finger through it. And I can already tell some of these frets, yeah, they're smoother than they were. So this is working for us. So once again, now I'm going to go up and down the sides. And kind of work my way back to the back of this neck now. So I can kind of see that nice kind of deeper color that we were talking about yesterday has kind of stayed. So that's good news for this. And then I'm just kind of going up and down the bulk of this. Is a lot easier without those frets to get long kind of working passes on this. And just kind of smooth up the entire headstock everywhere that we put oil yesterday. I'm just kind of smoothing up and getting it ready for the next coat. All right. Well, that actually feels pretty good. So what I'm going to do then, like I said, I'm going to go over this with some clean cloths and get all of the metal shavings out of there, and then I'm going to proceed with another coat. So I'll kind of speed up, time lapse it for you guys, but that's where we're going to go, and we're just going to keep repeating this, each day or whenever the coats are dry until I'm happy with this. So I'll see you guys back when everything is all set and done, and we'll wrap this up. Well, I am happy to announce that we are officially finished with this part of the guitar build, and the magic number for this guitar neck was 5 coats. So I did what I was saying, that each day I would kind of come and check, and I would sand down, use the steel wool to sand down the previous kind of residue and put a new coat on. And I did that 5 times. Now each time I was kind of checking it. I was picking up the neck, feeling it, pretending like I was playing, and I even did some comparisons. I would kind of do that with this neck, and then I would go to some other guitars and other basses that I already own and kind of feel and compare to what those felt like. Now, I don't have any other instruments that have this exact product on their necks, but I was still able to get a feel for what kind of finish and what kind of just feeling along the neck that I like. Now, in terms of some things that I learned, I want to show you some close-up pictures. So in this first picture, you're going to get a better sense of what these frets looked like every time I would come back for a new coat. Now, I keep saying that I was using the steel wool to kind of clear away that top layer, that external oil. Now, you can look at the top or the higher frets in this picture, and you can see the really bright reflections of the light, and you can almost kind of see some of those bumps. Now, that's what the neck looked like every single time I came back to it after it had dried. But on the lower frets, you can see what it looks like after going over it with a pass of the steel wool. The light is much less reflective. I mean, it's still a little bit there, but that's because we have knocked away or taken away the surface dried oil. Some of the oil seeps into the neck, but some of the oil stays on top. And so that's kind of a good example of what that looks like. Now, as a tip for you guys, I also noticed some things that I needed to pay attention to, that with each coat, I kind of got a little better at knowing what to look for. So here's a picture of what I started to notice with my steel wool passes. You can see that close to the frets, you can kind of see that there's still some shine, still some of that shiny, bumpy stuff left over, but in the center of the frets, it's that duller matte finish. Now, what I started to realize was, as I was going over, if I didn't take care, just using the flat part of my finger in the middle of the frets, it was really good at getting that. But because the fret kind of sticks up a little bit, there was that gap, that little area in between the right up at the edge of the fret that was really hard to get. So what I did was I then started to really pay attention and take care to use kind of my fingernail up into that steel wool, so that once I went over the bulk of the neck, I then went back with my fingernail and got really close up to those frets so that I could knock down that as well. And finally, here are some pictures of what this looks like. So you can still see that even after taking off the surface, after the 5th coat, and I went back over it with the steel wool, the neck still has a shine. You can see that definitely on the back of the neck, that the lights that I'm shining on, it still reflect. Now, that was not happening before any of this is on there. So I'm still able to have a nicely finished neck with protection, and it's sealed really well, but it has a smooth, soft, very satin finish. That when you move your hand up and down this neck, it really moves unhindered. There's nothing kind of catching it or sticking it as it goes up and down. So I hope that you got something out of this process, and maybe now you're ready to try it for your own. So once again, just with a simple product like tru-oil and some elbow grease, we're able to get a neck all ready for the rest of the build. So until next time, play on, my friends, play on.